Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney save. Today we're working on one of the very final lots for Oasis Springs. We are almost done. This is the last neighborhood and we're down in the bottom left hand corner, kind of like a little bit of a commercial area of the map. I have been doing one lot per movie in this area for all of the other movies that I've already covered in Oasis Springs. So previously I did the Lion King restaurant, which you can see just next door on the left throughout today's video. And then if you look in the background on the very far right at the end of this strip, you will see Hopper's Hideaway, the Bugs Life themed bar that was featured in the movie. I kind of did those at the end of each set of films when I was originally building, but I wanted to skip the Aladdin one for now because I wanted it to be a little bit of a surprise, but I also felt like it didn't fit well in the cycle of videos that I was doing. There was a lot of Aladdin stuff at the time, so I figured I would just break it up and do this final Aladdin lot by itself on its own. And it's also, this lot today is kind of a combination of like all Aladdin things. There is inspiration from Agrabah Market, Agrabah Palace, Jasmine herself, tigers, a little bit of Aladdin, and there's also some inspiration from Disney World, which I had done also in the Lion King build on the left there. The shell of the build is actually a chunk of Disney World. This is specifically in Adventureland. If you've ever been to the area right in front of the Magic Carpet ride at Disney World, there is a meet and greet area where you can usually meet Princess Jasmine and Aladdin. There's a little cafe, market, and restaurant that sometimes is open in that area, although anytime I've ever been to Disney, it's never been open for me. And there's a lot of buildings, set dressing to kind of liven up that area and make it look a little bit thematically more appropriate. I basically took a chunk of those buildings, especially that entrance into the cafe, the Agrabah Market Cafe, and the meet and greet area and the tents that are immediately surrounding it and all the background buildings and things, and I recreated that as the shell for today's build. Now the build itself is a cat cafe. This is like Jasmine's big cat cafe. I am looking for name recommendations if anybody has any. It's supposed to be a cat cafe where she could come with Raja or other big exotic cats. And I tend to do this theme throughout the save where I have the Disney princesses either theme a lot or create a lot for the world that's sort of like a community lot for the entire world to enjoy. So this is Princess Jasmine's. She contributed a little cafe, nice place for her and Raja to come, and I feel like the set dressing of the world, like culturally for Aladdin, makes a lot of sense to do a cafe. I was also specifically really looking to put a cafe in Oasis Springs. I tried to cover as many different lot types as possible when doing this world, so I knew I wanted a cafe somewhere, and she felt like the perfect character and the perfect backdrop to kind of base it off of. So if you have any name ideas, please let me know. I was not able to come up with a very good one, and as of right now, the video might be just named like Jasmine's Cat Cafe. I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do with it, but it's not named in the save file because I'm just not sure. The build ends up turning out a lot more colorful than I think I initially intended to do when I went into it. I was using Disney World as like a backdrop, and so I had a lot of references for that, but there are also a couple of different like Aladdin references throughout other Disney parks. Specifically, if you go to, I think it's Disneyland Paris has like a dedicated Agrabah cafe, and I found a lot of that really useful for the inspiration on the inside, but they use so many light fixtures, tiling, drapery, and it really started to embody the colorfulness of Agrabah Palace, and the more that I did it, the more I decided I was just gonna fully lean into it, especially with the colorful backdrop of like the circus tent sort of vibe we've got going on with the roofs, and in a few moments here when I start to add in some of the drapery and the tents and the shade for the various seating arrangements. It was so colorful and bright, and I really did love it, and it reminded me of the palace a lot. It's probably my most colorful palace, and it's one of the reasons that I love it so much. So instead of doing more of like the Agrabah Market brown woodsy tones, I decided we'd go a little bit more palace with it. I think that also makes sense because if you consider that this is something that Jasmine sort of created or contributed to the world, a lot of money would go into it. There would be a lot of tiling, a lot of plants, a lot of details, things that come from the palace, gold trimming, the things that are a little bit nicer looking probably make sense in terms of the style and design of the architecture on the building. Disney is, of course, really good about like theming and very immersive theming. They make you feel like you're completely transported to a new world whenever you step into a different location inside of the different Disney parks. So when you're in this area of Adventureland, a lot of the buildings are kind of taller and they look like the street buildings, the Agrabah Market buildings, and the same sort of shape, kind of at the top and then the back side of the buildings. And that's obviously intentional so that you can't like see over it, because if you saw over it and beyond it, you would see the castle and some of the other areas of the park that don't thematically go with the area that you're in. So I wanted to recreate sort of that back structure as well with the buildings that reminded me more of Agrabah Market, and that ends up being the front side of the building. So if that's not making sense, you'll see it come together here in a moment, but basically I ended up working backwards for this build. The part that you're seeing majorly in the beginning is actually the back side. It's the side that faces the road, and then the entryway looks more like Agrabah Market with those like standard rectangle buildings, the ones that I did over on not just Agrabah Market, but when I did the Aladdin rental, I also did this same sort of structure. It does create a little bit of a conflict when I go in to actually decorate, because a lot of the rooms were very oddly shaped and just not lining up super perfectly. So when it came to things like arches and drapery and symmetry, that wasn't working out for me. And I think I get a little bit stressed when that happens, to be honest with you. Sometimes if my builds don't have like a sense of symmetry to them, and I think what happens is I watch a lot of other builders, especially now on TikTok. My TikTok has figured out that I do Sims. Obviously I upload Sims videos and things like that, but it recommends me live streams of other creators, and those creators, nothing against them, obviously they're doing brilliant things, but they're not creating what I'm usually making. A lot of them are making like standard houses or decorating like suburban residential areas, things that can be done very symmetrically, very neatly, and it's all so beautifully done. And I just look at it and I'm like, wow, why does this make me feel so bad about everything that I build? It makes me feel like I'm just a terrible builder, and I really don't know why, because obviously what I'm building is just so different, and there is a lot of like movie recreation, a lot of trying to work with what I have, or trying to recreate something that we just know going into it is not going to be like this even, tidy, nice and neat build. But it does make me feel a little bit bad about myself sometimes. I'm like, if I can't get it to look a certain way, if not everything's straight, if the columns don't line up, is it even a good build? And then I sit there and really think about it and kind of hate it. So there was a point with this build that I really loved it in the beginning. The colors, the vibrancy, the fountain out front, it's absolutely gorgeous. But then I really hated it for a little while, especially when we go to the interior. And I think I've settled on I like it at the end. So you guys let me know what you think. Now the fountain outside is actually supposed to be inspired by the Magic Carpet ride. And I initially was going to maybe even do some floating carpets and kind of put them up around and make it look physically more like the ride, but it was a little bit cheesy and it didn't make much sense in context. So instead of actually doing that, what I did is just recreate the fountain. And if you're like, well, that fountain is actually a lot more fancy than the version in Disney World, yes it is. Obviously I livened it up for the build a little bit, but if you have ever ridden the Magic Carpet ride in any of the other Disney parks, I think one that comes to mind is possibly Paris. Theirs is a lot nicer than the one in Disney World. It's got this beautiful fountain, greenery, gold trimming. It's just better done, not better quality. It's a little bit newer. So my version of the fountain is a little more inspired by that one specifically. And then I was like, maybe I could put some seating around it. We'll do some purple and blue seating, kind of representative of the carpets and the seats on the ride around the fountain. And you'll see me play with that a lot in the build because I just hated how close it was to the fountain, and it just didn't feel like this back courtyard area was really flowing correctly. I wasn't quite sure how to lay everything out. But then I remembered at some point in the build that I wasn't just worried about the people, right? This is a cat cafe. So we need some stuff here for cats, and don't worry, we're gonna get a ton of it. Lots of cat trees, the cat toy boxes, the ones that you can kind of like climb up onto. There's a couple of different packs. The cats and dogs pack and the My First Pet Stuff pack comes with different versions of those like climbable cat trees, and the scratching pads as well. So I start bringing that into the build, trying to think of like, we need to have seating for the cats and the humans kind of in close proximity to one another. Obviously you would come here with the intention of maybe bringing your own cat, or you could come here with the intention of adopting a cat. That's a very classic sort of idea. There are lots of those where you can like go sit, have a coffee, meet some kitties that need adopting, and take one home potentially. And the way that I'm sort of recreating that in the save file is that it's going to have two lot traits. One is cat hangout, which I believe will cause random cats to spawn, like stray cats. And then the other one is cat friendly, and that one causes forces you to bring your animal, or it's vice versa, one way or another, both of the cat appropriate traits that go into the cat trait options panel are going to be on the lot so that cats are prevalent here. I do just want to point out, so that people understand, Raja in my save file, and I think the intention when creating this build was that Jasmine and Raja would come here together, and this was sort of like her cafe, and she would bring Raja here to play with the other cats, maybe some other large cats if you wanted to add those into the save. The Kailano makes a lot of really, really beautiful ones that you can search on the gallery and then add in if you want to put some additional cats into the game. My version of Raja in the Disney save is a dog, and that was because of size restrictions. There are versions again on the gallery that you could possibly replace Raja with to make him an actual cat, where someone has maybe colored a cat to be a tiger, but because I really wanted the size and just like the larger animal aspect, he is a dog. So because this lot doesn't have dog traits, Raja is not going to come here, and he won't come here with Jasmine. I guess you could probably still just bring him, but I don't know how that will go as far as like cats and dogs interacting in like a cat-friendly space where maybe you don't want to bring a dog all the time. Because unfortunately, even though when you look at Raja, you wouldn't even know that he's a dog, he still acts like a dog in the game, and I think there can be like little spats between cats and dogs. But also, if a cat cafe existed in real life, you probably wouldn't bring your dog there, right? So if you want Raja to come or spawn here, you probably need to add the dog traits to the lot yourself manually. And after talking to patrons, I was really back and forth on whether or not I would just include this, but I'm just gonna leave it with the cat traits, and you can just add it yourself if you want to change that, or if you want it to be like very much cat focused, you can leave it as it is. We are about to jump to the interior here momentarily, and I know this looks like a really big cafe. When you look at it, you're like, this is just so massive in terms of what the build actually needs to function for, but a lot of it is this outside courtyard area, and I wanted a lot of it to be outdoors. I felt like that was something that cats really love. Whether or not you're supposed to let your cats out of your house is neither here nor there, but they love it. They love laying in the sun. I also created a sun room specifically so the cats can be indoors but still kind of have the warmth of it all. And it's not as big as it looks because of the way the buildings are morphed together, and a lot of them are sharing or hugging walls. You're gonna see momentarily here that it's not as large as it looks, and it does create a lot of spaces that are sort of separate from one another, where you could go kind of privately to have a coffee or a drink and either be with cats or not be with the cats, because there are some spaces that are dedicated just to Sims, and then some that are a little bit more cat focused with lots of cat interactive things that you could use with them. I will just mention I apologize for Tool and the way that it looks. I know the UI on it is messed up in the video. It is also going to be like that in my next video, which is the final build for Oasis Springs, and a brand new movie also that I haven't done in Oasis Springs. I'm not announcing what it is. It'll just be a total surprise, but I recognize that it was like that. The creator for the Tool mod did not immediately fix Tool when the last patch came out, which I don't blame them whatsoever, but I had to make some videos, so I kind of had to ignore it, and it's just a UI thing. It's not affecting the game in any way. In a little bit of tiny me news, I'm very, very excited to announce that I picked my travel for this year. And every year for like the past 5 or so years, you guys know I love to travel, but typically speaking, I will go back and forth to London from the US to London, back and forth, because at the time I was back and forth with my husband. He is from London, lives in London, and I had to travel a lot to go and visit him, and he would sometimes come to me. So that kind of took up my travel for a few years and really wasn't able to go anywhere else, really. And then for the last couple of years, now that I officially live in London, I've been able to travel a little bit more. So we did Disneyland Paris twice, we did Disney World twice, and I said that when I came back from Disney World last year, I was done with Disney trips for a little while. I also did go to Paris, and I have this really long list of places that I would absolutely love to go. But then we were looking at travel as the beginning of the year kind of rolled around, and my husband needs to request time off work, and so do I. And so we have to really plan about what we're going to do. And I really, really wanted to go to Iceland or Italy or Scotland. And for various reasons, each of those options was not going to be viable for different reasons. The other thing is this December is my 30th birthday. So it's a big year for me. And I don't normally do a whole lot for my birthday, to be honest with you. I share it with Christmas Eve. So it gets kind of skipped most of the time, and I keep it really low key. I will be lucky to do anything like on my birthday day, let alone in the general time of my birthday. But I decided as a treat to myself that I was really going to try to make it important this year. I'm only going to get one of these, and since I don't get a lot of my other birthdays kind of celebrated. Like, obviously my husband does things for me and this and that, but it's just not the same as if you just have like a normal birthday on any other day of the week where people are more available to do things and it's easier and buildings are open and not closed businesses, so you can actually make plans, that kind of a deal. I'm gonna treat myself and go somewhere big for my birthday this year. So we looked around and we thought about it, and we finally have decided that we're gonna go to Disneyland in California. This is a big trip for us because it is now physically so far away from me in the world. Like, obviously when I lived in the US, I was from the East Coast, so it was a little bit more feasible and a little bit closer, and now it is just so far. It's one of the furthest places that I could have picked to go. I have never been that far on the west coast of the US, and I have never been to Disneyland, so it's time to finally go. We're gonna stay at the Pixar Place Hotel, which is newly renovated. It's beautiful. We are very excited. Deposit is already down. We are planning the trip, and I'll be talking a little bit about it here and there as we kind of like get up to the date. It's not until the end of this year. We booked it for sometime in the later half of the year, so I'll still be very much around working on the save. And to be honest with you, I don't have a ton of other travel plans this year. I might go back to the US one other time to visit family in the summer possibly, but I do not have that trip booked at this time. So I am working on that also possibly, but it's such a big trip. It's so far away. We're gonna stay for probably about a week. Normally when we go to Disney World, we stay for 2, but we really just wanted to do the week. It doesn't require it for Disneyland as far as I could really see. Most people had recommended, and please let me know what you think about this if you are a Disneyland local, if you have been before, what your opinions are on park days and how long it takes to do each park. I have had really varying opinions. There are some people that have told me that Disneyland in California, like California Adventure and Disneyland, are each one-day parks. Looking at the maps, especially for Disneyland, I don't really see how that's possible. I've also had other people say to me that each one is about a 2-day park, especially if you've never been before. I'm going for about a week, so I think we'll be able to get everything covered regardless. It's also very, like, fortunately, but very unfortunate at the same time, because it means that it will be more busy than usual. It is an anniversary year for Disneyland, and they're doing a celebration. A few years ago, before the pandemic, my sister and I planned our first trip to Disney World together. We had never gone as children, and we were so excited to take my niece, she was little at the time, and do this like family trip together. And we booked everything before anything in the world happened, so we didn't know that that was coming around the corner, obviously, but we didn't know also that that was an anniversary year for Disney World. We actually were unfortunate enough to book our trip in the first month of the Disney World 50th anniversary. So I swore after that trip I would never, ever, ever go back to Disney World. It was crowded beyond belief. I'm talking about like 2-hour waits for Small World, lines out the door, the hottest week of my life, completely wall-to-wall people, crowded. I couldn't believe that Disney sold that capacity of people considering like where the world was at that time. It was an absolutely terrible experience, and I swore I would never go back. And then my husband was like, please go with me again and let's try. So a few years later, we did end up going, and it was a much better experience. But I think because I have gone during an anniversary year, and obviously it's a different location, but I know the vibe. I know it's gonna happen. I know it draws more people in than usual. I know that they change the menus and do special food, so you can't always get those things that you thought you were gonna be able to get, and they change all the merch, and it's gonna be good. I'm really excited. Also a little bit nervous, not intentional. We actually didn't find out yet again until after we booked, and then there was this big announcement that they're going to be doing all these new shows at Disneyland and similar sort of things, new menu options, new stuff. So it's going to be really great and interesting, and I am kind of excited to experience the anniversary for both parks, but I am also a little bit nervous that it's going to be more crowded than it normally would be, and I'm just not going to have a great time the way that I probably would have if I didn't pick this year. But it doesn't matter. We're going. It's already booked. I'm excited. I'm excited to finally be able to try both parks. A lot of people got opinions about which one is better than the other, and obviously I can't really comment because I haven't been to both, but that will be no more by the end of the year. If you've been to both, let me know what your favorite is. I'm also just excited in general to knock another one off the list. I would like to visit all of them someday. Japan is very, very, very high up there. I've brought that up many times. Now, for the interior of the build, as you can see, what I was mentioning earlier regarding the smaller rooms Sims. I cut them off a little bit specifically in this way so that you did have these more tucked in, condensed spaces. This was very much depicted in some of the references that I was using from the Agrabah Cafe in Paris, but I also just felt like it helped make the build feel a little bit better in terms of what I was talking about earlier, mentioning that I was trying to get a little bit more symmetry with the build and get these archways that lined up and lots of different drapery that I could have lining up. So the way that this basically works, if you think about the front of the building and like entering from the front side of the building, if you go through the main doors, there is a little bit of an area in the immediate entryway there where you can sit. There's a couple of tables that you could see I was tucking into the weirdly shaped wall. One of them is kind of like at an angle, and there is a little cat cedary tree thing in there for some cats to be able to come in and hang out with you. But if you go through that hallway, that is the main cafe area. There's really only that in there. I'm trying to think about pathing when making this as well and making this as functional as possible. So you want that area where Sims are going to line up to actually get a drink and interact with the cafe station to be as open as possible. And I found that in other builds that really helps with functionality. So that area is very open and exposed. It's completely open with like archways on all sides. It opens up into the courtyard area, and there really isn't any seating in there, and that's intentional because again, I wanted the area clear for Sims to be able to grab the drink and get away from that area. Now that I think about it, I do have another cafe, and it's over in Mount Komorebi. It is the Olaf themed cafe. I think I thought about it a lot when I was doing this build because when I play tested that, I had a really hard time with pathing and trying to get Sims to actually use the cafe properly. And it's one of the ones where I did the cafe station in the same area as most of the seating. So unfortunately, because it's a little bit condensed in there, they sometimes get confused. And that is a super big cafe where it has like this whole upstairs area and it has this private little area with like a fireplace and everything. So there's plenty of room to move away from that, but there are certain items in the game that the Sims really gravitate towards. And whenever a lot is based around like one functional object, that tends to be the issue. Don't get me wrong, that one works and I made it functional before I put it on the gallery or put it in the save and everything, but now I am a more experienced builder, so I think about these things a little bit more in terms of making today's build. Then if you go through the archway that's on the right of the little cafe area, there's a seating area in there that has a cat tree and a cat bed or two. There is some human seating in there as well, and it's a bigger, more open area for lots of the two different types of Sims to be able to interact. There is a offshoot little smaller hallway that's got two tables tucked against the walls. You can see it with like the mirror above, and that one is just for humans. If for some reason you came here and you didn't want to be around the cats, that one is where you could go to get away. Lastly, like I mentioned, there is a sunroom. The sunroom is actually completely attached to the outside courtyard area. It's not attached to the rest of the build in terms of being able to enter. You would have to actually go out to the courtyard and then into the sunroom area, and we'll be decorating that momentarily here. There is an upstairs area, and that's where I decided to put the bathrooms. There are two, and then at the end of the video, we're going to very quickly decorate kind of like a closet storage area. I decided that's what made the most sense, especially for a business like this. You would have some kind of a dedicated closet area that's got extra chairs, mugs, cleaning equipment, maybe a private place for the cats to be able to go to if they didn't want to interact with people for any reason. I'm gonna see about maybe locking that door in the Disney save, although I think that you're limited in terms of being able to lock doors on commercial lots, but if you can, and I cannot remember if you can right now, but if you can, I would like to lock that because I don't really want Sims to be able to go up there and sit in the extra chairs or anything. It's not supposed to be a part of the main cafe area, and everything else is so beautifully decorated and colorful. I don't see why you would want to be up there, but that's just the kind of thing that Sims would really do to make me mad, honestly. In terms of packs for today's build, I am using obviously Courtyard Oasis. It is one of my favorite kits that they ever did. It's so specific in terms of architecture, but it has really become so handy and such a staple for all of my Agrabah themed things. The windows are beautiful, the tiling on the wallpapers is beautiful, the different flooring. I'm also using a lot of For Rent. I found that like the Asian inspiration in terms of the different pieces that come from that are really helpful and able to be integrated well with this pack, or with that kit, I should say. And then we're using some cats and dogs with all of the little kitty decor. There are different tigers and things sort of hidden around the build, but also For Rent has the tiger sanctuary, so that's where you get some different posters and little statue pieces that have tigers on them that make the build a little bit more catered specifically towards Raja. Lanterns from For Rent. The lighting, the bigger chandeliers are from the Star Wars pack. I love that pack for these like huge detailed chandeliers. I did use them over in Agrabah Palace as well, and they really are something that I think is missing from Courtyard Oasis that combined with Star Wars is super handy to have like both of those things. I know if you're not a Star Wars person, and I find that a little bit hard to believe in some regard. If you are a Disney lover, most of you are going to be Star Wars people also. But if you're not, and you're like very anti-Star Wars pack, I'm telling you, I use it all the time. I think the cast is brilliant. I think the build and buy is really multi-useful for so many different things, for industrial, for grunge, for fantasy. It's something that I very heavily rely on. So if you're thinking about downloading the Disney Save and you don't have a lot of packs, it is one that I really truly do recommend. Regardless of the gameplay, regardless of the world, all of that aside and like the controversy aside, I advocate for the Star Wars pack because I use it a ton. How do you guys feel about all of the different kits that have been coming out recently? I just caught up with a bunch of the kits, and then they released literally 4 more, and then the day I'm recording this video, they are releasing 2 more. And I feel like it's way too much. Like at a certain point, I was really dedicated to, I'm going to get all of the kits, all of it is super helpful. Anything more that I could have to build with, make characters with, is going to be helpful and useful in some regard. And that is true. Like every pack comes with something that I will eventually use, but because kits never go on sale and they are creating them at such a rapid rate, I'm really starting to get fed up with how quickly they come out. It seems like I can never catch up. Right now at this point, I don't own a lot of the cast kits, and then I don't own the 4 new ones, and now there's 2 new ones coming out, and I won't own all of those, and it feels like I'm right back at like 10 packs ago when I just purchased 5 packs. And I know that's like their intention. It's just that it would feel so much better if they did like 1 a month for the rest of the year, or 2 every 6 months. That would feel really manageable and reasonable. And even though the theming for some of them is really cool, like the new Secret Sanctuary kit, really neat, and I like the idea of doing some of the theming that you get the cast and the build and buy in one pack. It's like a mini stuff pack. I really like that because I think that that means that there's certain topics that The Sims does where you don't get both things. Like when they did the castle kit, they could have done some really cool dresses that went with that, or some really cool stuff that I would have loved to see. And now it feels like they've already covered castles, so we might not necessarily get a dedicated cast kit for those types of things. So I like when they sort of like combine both of that. I think that's brilliant. I also have been enjoying the creator kits more so than I think some of the regular kits, but just in general, I really hope they start to slow down with it. It's getting very annoying. That is pretty much going to wrap up today's build with our little closet area that you can see at the end of the video here. Just some extra cups and mugs and coffee stuff and things that you might need for the animals, like some food. And let me know what you thought of the build today. Do you like it? What are your thoughts? Any name recommendations? Seriously, guys, I really do need it. Leave it in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for the next build, which is going to be the final build and the final thing for Oasis Springs other than the tour video, which of course we'll be doing to round out the world here. If you'd like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will talk to you all in the next one.